Good morning. Welcome to the Umpqua Unitarian Universalist Congregation. I am Glennis Peterson, your service leader for today. And in my neighborhood, spring flowers abound as the tinkling of people's wind chimes fill the air with music, and we're all anxious to return to a time when we can meet again. For now, though, we can call and connect with each other. Do a friend check. You'll be happy you did. Our speaker this week is Stephen Landale, and he will be available after this service for an after-service discussion on Zoom. Every Sunday, the sign-in time is 11:15. The conversation will start at 11:30. Just look for Michael Wheeler's email with the link to the Zoom discussion. And it came along with the link to this program, by the way. In addition to services and discussions, our UUUC YouTube channel, say that fast 3 times, our channel includes meditations and interviews, so there's a lot to look at. I want to thank Michael Wheeler and Lucy Swingham for all of their work in producing these videos every week. Here, today, in this virtual space, may we listen so that we can hear. May we hear so that we can feel. May we feel so that we can know, and may we know so that we can change ourselves and this world. May this chalice we light our way. Our opening words this morning are from Richard M. Fuchs. Creator of all times and seasons, and of all seasons of our lives, we gather, thankful for the days that have been, even those that have tried our souls, and hopeful for the days that shall be, even those that shall demand of us the best that we have of faith and hope and courage, till we have become one with ourselves and in all the seasons to come, from the glad renewal of spring to the summer, autumn days of green and gold and yellow, and the shining colors of fruition and harvest, to the white wisdom days of winter, where all things wait in patience for the change that shall bring transformation. Our readings this morning are quotations from The Way of Transition by William Bridges. There is no sin punished more implacably by nature than the sin of resistance to change. Anne Morrow Lindbergh.
The chief object of education is not to learn things, but to unlearn things. G.K. Chesterton.
Only in growth, reform, and change, paradoxically enough, is true security to be found. Anne Morrow Lindbergh.
Everybody wants to be somebody. Nobody wants to grow. Goethe. The important thing is this: to be able at any moment to sacrifice what we are for what we could become. Charles Dubois.
You make what seems a simple choice. Choose a man or a job or a neighborhood, And what you have chosen is not a man or a job or a neighborhood, but a life. Jasmine West.
And to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from. T.S. Eliot. He that lacks time to mourn lacks time to mend. Shakespeare.
Confusion is a word we have invented for an order which is not yet understood. Henry Miller.
Life does not accommodate you. It shatters you. Every seed destroys its container, or else there would be no fruition. Florida Scott Maxwell.
Life is the only real counselor. Edith Wharton.
The trip becomes a journey after you have lost your luggage. Anonymous.
And from Ecclesiastes, to everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. And now, wherever you are, or whenever you are, I'd like you to sit back in your chair and relax. And as you relax, you breathe in, deep down to the soul, and breathe out. Noticing each muscle as you relax even more into your chair. Breathe in and breathe out. Within the space of an instant, you can make a first impression, show gratitude, kiss, change your mind, wipe away a tear, live, and die. It only takes a minute to write a note, tell a joke, change a diaper, sing a song, or be still. Within an hour, you can share a meal, run an errand, make a cake or make love, attend a parade, or balance your checkbook. Well, sometimes. It takes a day to paint a room, feed a crowd, visit relatives, read a book, and rest. If you commit a year, you can write a book, plant and harvest a crop, become a parent, change your life. And within your lifetime and with your life, you can and you will change the world. And now as you slowly return to normal consciousness, remember these words and think about the transitions in your life and how they have affected your world. And now I'd like to introduce Stephen Landale. Reverend Stephen Landale has been a hospice chaplain in Corvallis and Eugene for 8 years. Prior to that, he served UU congregations as interim, settled, and consulting minister for 12 years. He is a proud father of 2 children and looks forward to his upcoming marriage.
Good morning, Roseburg friends. What interesting times we are living in now. Perhaps more literally than the author of Ecclesiastes ever imagined, this is indeed a time to refrain from embracing. At least physically embracing those outside of our household, unless, of course, we're all vaccinated and outside, etc. There is a time and a season for everything, and this season, too, shall pass. For some, this is a most grievous time, especially those who have lost a loved one or more than one to COVID or to some other cause, those who have not been able to visit their ailing loved ones, and the many, many who have been seriously isolated and suffered emotionally and therefore spiritually and physically and mentally as a result. This has been an anxious and even frightening time for those who have lost jobs or are afraid of being on the street or are dependent on those who have lost jobs, and for those who are in healthcare and other fields who regularly put themselves at risk. As Florida Scott Maxwell wrote, "Life does not accommodate you, it shatters you." Indeed. As a hospice chaplain and grief support group leader, I can't help but notice the stages of grief we have been cycling through during this pandemic. Shock, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And that's for everyone, even for those of us fortunate enough not to have suffered a major loss, the death of a loved one, the loss of a job. For those who have, the grief and fear is compounded. Even the near misses are frightening. The case of COVID that was kind of mild, or the friend or coworker who's suffering from COVID-like symptoms that turn out to be something else. In this sermon, I'll be turning for guidance to the work of William Bridges, particularly his books Transitions and The Way of Transition, from which I collected the literary quotations read for you earlier. I'll also be turning to popular TV shows from about 15 years ago, Lost and Battlestar Galactica. These shows followed on the heels of 9/11, another event that shook us to our core. My key point is this: we are living in the neutral zone. Not the twilight zone, the neutral zone. This is a concept and language I learned in the work of William Bridges. And by the way, if you're going to do this work in transitions, why not already have the last name of Bridges? Very convenient. He picked up this concept from a Dutch anthropologist, Arnold van Gennep, who published in 1909 the book Rites of Passage, a study of non-Western rituals used by tribal groups to negotiate the turning points of their lives. The neutral zone is the bridge between the ending of one phase of life and the beginning of another, whether that change be caused by adolescence, the death of a loved one, an engagement or marriage, a divorce, a move, or an illness. Many transitions move underneath the surface, as one may let go of an old habit or way of being, while still being in the same external situation. The neutral zone also applies when change is forced by external events, such as an earthquake, a hurricane, or a pandemic, or a war or terrorist attack, an economic recession or depression. The neutral zone is often a time of great turbulence. It can also, though, be a time of quiet, of time seeming to slow down. Think of the times that you have lost a loved one, how grief can put you on a roller coaster of emotions and change, and yet how empty and flat you may feel as well. And, mysteriously and beautifully, we may also be graced during these times of grief and crises by an inexplicable sense of peace, that all somehow deep down is well. A moment in eternity, a taste of heaven. In the neutral zone, just as in grief generally, the most important thing is to feel what we're feeling, to allow all of the unrest we're experiencing be like a tilling of the soil, disrupting and yet bringing in oxygen and making place for seeds to grow. The only way through grief is through it. We may never get over the loss of a loved one, but we are changed by their loss. Some of these changes may even come over time to be blessings to ourselves and others, such as a deepened sensitivity, compassion, and resilience. And this is how it is in all experiences of the neutral zone. Yes, tend to the practical tasks, but don't rush the feelings. Allow the time of turbulent change to be a teacher, a revealer of a new emerging self. A key concept of Bridges is the difference between change and transition. The change is the death, the end of a relationship or job, the move, the pandemic and the treatment, social or physical distancing leading to economic shutdowns. The transition is the accompanying internal changes that do or do not take place. For example, moving on with your life, internalizing the best qualities of our lost loved one, and with a more compassionate heart for others who have experienced loss. Allowing our souls to be deepened by the seeming failure of a relationship or work venture, so that we are in a way different people in our next relationship or venture, and so on. William Bridges writes, "Transition does not require that you reject or deny the importance of your old life, just that you let go of it. Transition does not require that you reject or deny the importance of your old life, just that you let go of it." He described the neutral zone as a place where we have a ringside seat to observe oneself, particularly the ways we habitually and not necessarily helpfully tend to react to change. The neutral zone is a time to foster new ways of adapting to change. So for all of the very real losses we are experiencing during this pandemic, and all of the quite understandable anxiety and fear about very plausible scenarios for others and ourselves, this time is also one of opportunity. It will be a lost opportunity if we do not allow ourselves, during this time of cataclysmic change, to experience an inner transition as we continue to endure this time of social distancing and all that comes with it. It will be a lost opportunity if we do not make a meaningful transition back in the weeks or months ahead, if we are the same people with the same habits. As Goethe said, "Everybody wants to be somebody, nobody wants to grow." Now, speaking of Lost, I've been thinking of that groundbreaking TV series that ran from 2004 to 10, beginning just 3 years after 9/11 and running through the Great Recession. The show begins with its characters finding themselves on a tropical island after their plane crashed onto the beach. Now, the plane crash is what Bridges calls a change. 1 hour you're flying from Australia to Los Angeles, the next you're marooned on a beach with about 50 strangers, many wounded, and the bodies of those who did not survive. How the characters adapt to this change is what Bridges calls transition. Some adjust more quickly than others. The first and main character, Jack, wakes in a jungle, gradually remembers the crash, and runs to the beach, where he immediately tends to the wounded. He seems to have transitioned remarkably quickly, but not really. Jack is a surgeon, and tending to the wounded is what Jack has done for years. He has carried over parts of his former self, putting them to good use. But this does not mean he has transitioned. He passes on an opportunity for transition when he declines an invitation to preside over or even participate in a funeral service for those who died in the crash. Returning to the States from Australia with the body of his father on the plane, Jack is literally traveling with his dead father, but has not yet done the soul work of transition following his death. That, of course, comes in a later episode. A young woman named Shannon resists transition to an almost comical degree, tanning herself on the beach, asking her brother why he bothers with so much activity when the rescuers will be there any hour. She continues in this vein for days. Watching this episode again early in the pandemic, I couldn't help but think of our former president and some governors being in denial of this pandemic, and all those beachgoers in Florida. And this denial is still continuing, a year and over 560,000 deaths later. I have a friend from Michigan, where the pandemic is currently surging. Out of her large extended family, just her mother and one brother are getting vaccinated and taking COVID seriously. Denial is not just a river in Egypt. Charlie, played by the same actor who played Merry the Hobbit in the Lord of the Rings movies, is not a natural hero, leader, or adventurer, yet he surprisingly volunteers for a dangerous mission to seek out the cabin of the airplane, believed to be inland. His motive for this mission turns out to be most un-Hobbit-like, however, as he climbs over dead bodies to get to the bathroom, where he reaches into the latrine to recover his precious, a bag of heroin. I can hardly imagine a stronger image of a character responding to change with action and apparent bravery, yet resisting internal transition. Then Charlie going back to the monster-guarded plane and even to the toilet to recover his drugs. Later, I notice a tattoo on his arm. Living is easy with eyes closed. Charlie takes every opportunity in the early episodes to mention that he is a bassist and backup vocalist in a popular band. Inconsequential skills in this situation. He has one of the most difficult transitions, giving up a rock star identity, a drug addiction, and a habit of living with eyes closed. Charlie could easily represent the United States of America in our current predicament. We think we're the stars of the world. We're addicted to so many things, and we find it easier to live with eyes closed. Again, Bridges writes, transition does not require that you reject or deny the importance of your old life, just that you let go of it. We can resist this letting go in myriad ways, embracing change while also resisting transition. People who jump from relationship to relationship, or from job to job, or from one obsession to another, may appear to be liberated or fearless in their embrace of change, but often these external changes are superficial. The person behaves essentially the same way in the new relationship, job, or activity. We've all seen this in others. And here's a secret. Others have seen it in us too. These external changes are made precisely to avoid true transition and all of its accompanying discomfort and uncertainty. Being the comfortable, flawed version of oneself may keep bringing the same predictable, often miserable results, but that can seem a safer choice than the risk of transitioning to a new self with unknown results. To make a true transition, rather than jump into the next superficial change, one must be willing to enter the disorientation of the neutral zone. Perhaps it is a little like the Twilight Zone, the place of unknowing. Each transition is a little like adolescence, when you're part child, part teenager, and part adult, and nobody knows, least of all ourselves, which self will emerge in a given situation. The magical nature of the island in the Lost series resonates because there is something otherworldly about the neutral zone. And of course, there's something otherworldly about most science fiction, including one of my favorite TV series, the rebooted Battlestar Galactica series of roughly the same years as Lost. Lost begins with a plane crash. Battlestar Galactica aired in 2002, just months after 9/11, begins within the first hour or so with all but 100,000 humans being destroyed in a massive attack by the Cylons, robots originally created by humans to serve human need. This kind of sudden, catastrophic, civilization-destroying change is a closer fit, albeit much worse, to our situation, with a pandemic and economic devastation. And oh yes, we still have the growing effects of human-caused climate change to contend with. Remember the devastating brush fires in Australia? Seems like years now, but it was only the last 4 months of 2019. And then, of course, we had the fires much closer to home here in Oregon, near you in Roseburg and near me in Eugene. In Battlestar Galactica, as in our situation, the first key strategic decision needed to save tens of thousands of lives is the same: retreat. Galactica's unlikely hero is Laura Roslin, the Secretary of Education. Roslin learns, in short order, 1, cancer. 2, the world has come to an end. The Cylons have, in a single day, nearly destroyed all of humanity. 3, she has succeeded to the office of the presidency because the president, vice president, and the other 40 government leaders ahead of her on the line of succession have been killed. Roslin could have panicked. She could have remained in denial. She could very easily have ceded her power to the military leaders who were naturally taking charge. She did none of these things, at least not for long. She transformed herself from teacher and Secretary of Education into president, even as she was taking her oath of office. It's a great scene I'd like to show you where her character transforms as she's taking the oath. Roslin is a case study in transition. Her inner transition likely saves the lives of all the other people. As president, she also successfully transfers the parts of her old role and self that were useful to her new role and self. She realizes that the only real choice is to protect the children, including hope of future children, and run away. But in taking the oath of office, she becomes a decisive leader who provides clear direction for her people. Her hardest task is convincing Commander Adama. Commander Adama offers compelling, decisive leadership as well. He is truly remarkable as a military commander. Like Jack the surgeon on Lost, he does not hesitate, and his actions save lives. But none of this changes the fact that he is fighting a vastly superior and better prepared foe. All would be lost if Adama does not make a critical internal transition and realize that the school teacher, as he called President Roslin, at least he didn't call her that woman, all would be lost if he doesn't realize that Roslin is right. The only rational choice is to run away and hope people start making babies. Interestingly, Adama changes his mind after many arguments with her about this, but he changes his mind when he is distracted during an important conversation to observe in the background 2 young adults flirting. This is his neutral zone moment. He uncharacteristically loses focus on the task at hand, lets his mind wander for a moment, and he sees the big picture. By listening, by taking time to observe what his unconscious mind guides him to notice, and then by conscious choice, Adama transitions from commander of a small force recklessly attacking much stronger invaders to commander of a ragtag fleet bound for a place called Earth. He also seems to develop not only respect, but also a soft spot for the school teacher president, but that takes a while to develop. It's interesting to note how sci-fi myths have changed. In the 1960s, as we put a man on the moon, we watched Star Trek with Commander Kirk's mission to boldly go where no man has gone before. In the 1970s and 80s, as we were in a Cold War with the Soviet Union, we watched Star Wars with its war against the evil empire, the rebels against the evil empire. And do you recall that after Star Wars, in the 1980s, our real-life president, Ronald Reagan, described the Soviet Union as the evil empire? In Blade Runner, a few years later, good and evil became less well-defined, and even the lines between humanity and technology began to blur. Then, in the 90s especially, we began to worry about human-caused climate change, and later the unintended consequences of U.S. foreign policy in the Mideast that contributed to 9/11. And our new sci-fi heroes in Battlestar Galactica are saying things like this: Why are we as a people worth saving? We still commit murder. We still visit all of our sins upon our children. We refuse to accept responsibility for everything we've done. We decided to play God, create life. When that life turned against us, we comforted ourselves in the knowledge that it really wasn't our fault. Not really. You cannot play God and then wash your hands of the things that you created. Sooner or later, the day comes when you can't hide from the things that you've done anymore. These were Commander Adama's words at the decommissioning of the Battlestar Galactica shortly before the surprise attack of the Cylons. In the face of a massive threat to human life, we are having to do the same thing the Battlestar Galactica heroes did: retreat, run away from the threat, find home and be safe. But once we're safe, it's time to face the truth about the problems we've created. We're slowly beginning to return back to something resembling normalcy, but we still have a ways to go. I believe that the well-being of future generations depends on the degree to which we, all of us who find ourselves in this difficult time, transition internally before and during that change. So after this pandemic, when we have a job we value and start feeling sick with a possibly contagious illness, will we fall back into the familiar thinking that we can either tough it out or go to work and go to work, or exercise self-care and stay home? Will we be thinking tough it out, go to work, or exercise self-care and stay home so we can work more next week? Because you know what? As a daughter of a hospice patient said to me, these choices are both inherently self-centered. Our choice is actually to go to work for any reason and thereby endanger others, or practice care for others and stay home. The coronavirus pandemic did not create the need for this shift in perspective. It has revealed it to us. Every year since 2010, 12,000 to 60,000 people die of influenza in the United States alone. That's not quite as many, nearly as many as COVID-19, but it's still many, tens of thousands of people each year. Over 10 times that number become so ill that they are hospitalized. Stop and think of that. How many lives could have been saved, and how many could now be saved if we stopped thinking in terms of, do I push through and go to work? Or do I rest now so I can work more later? And start thinking in terms of others first. This is a radical change, a gift of this time. And you know, we better watch out, because this kind of shift in thinking just might snowball. We might stop living in denial of climate change and how our individual choices contribute to it. We might reconsider that destination wedding we were thinking of having or attending. We might realize that 2 annual cross-country flights to see family isn't perhaps entirely necessary. Perhaps that could be 1 trip or 1 every other year and stay longer. Or save the money from flights and buy an electric or hybrid car for the trip and fill in the gaps with Zoom, which we all just love now, I know. And perhaps we'll start reconsidering how we eat, the impact of eating meat in particular. Perhaps you've seen some of the lovely videos of the skies clearing up over Wuhan during the early months of the pandemic. And I saw one in Venice where people can see clear to the bottom of the water again. They'd never seen this before. The earth has gotten a breather during this pandemic, and people are wondering how much more resilient the earth will be to our abuse because of this breather. The 2020 breather for the earth will surely help. It might give us an extra year or two, perhaps more. But as we all know, slowing climate change requires massive changes in human behavior. If we are truly to change the course of the Titanic we're on, heading towards the devastating effects of climate change, then the breather many of us are receiving is even more important than the astonishing breather the earth has received. During this breather, if you are privileged to be having one, you may find inspiration in music or in art or in nature. You might find a mindfulness reset during this neutral zone, practices of awareness. You might find in religion stories that inspire and give meaning and direction. Religious stories sustained and inspired the people in Battlestar Galactica as they sought for the mythical planet called Earth. President Roslin accepted the role of a prophesied leader. In our world, religious stories and structures have shaped American history in positive ways. We can see Exodus very much alive in the spirituals American slaves sang, and in the speeches and sermons of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King and other civil rights leaders. You might find in secular history inspiration, guidance, and especially warnings. Those who do not know history are bound to repeat it. Or you might find meaning in philosophies like existentialism. Existentialism is a philosophy that says humanity is not inherently good or inherently evil. We are precisely what our actions show us to be. You might find meaning in realizing that with every action and inaction, you are defining humanity. Commander Adama finds meaning in this approach by answering the question, are we worth saving, moment to moment, and how he lives? Really, what an amazing shift in perspective this is. From asking, will we get through this? Will we survive? Or even, how will we survive? To asking, how can I make us more worthy of saving? How can I be, in this moment, the best humanity has to offer? We are in a great time of change now, devastating change. There will come a time when we can return to our old ways for the most part. We've taken a few steps in that direction already. But let's remember that change means nothing if there is not an internal transition. God or no God, intrinsic meaning in the universe or no, we are, most of us, outside of the hospitals and other places, to some degree, on a timeout. We are in the neutral zone, no longer living the life we were, and not yet living the life we hope to be living in the months or possibly years ahead. We have a ringside seat to see how we've been living, great in many ways, poorly in others, and downright abusive to the earth, which is therefore less hospitable to us. This is a crisis, a once-in-a-lifetime crisis. It may also be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, but only if we change from the inside out. Only if we start thinking less about ourselves and our needs, and especially the countless wants we mistake for needs. Only if we stop spending money on things we don't need and instead align our financial investments with our values. Only if we stop fighting wars and stop pretending that wars aren't being fought all over the world with American weapons and we can't do anything about them. Only if we stop complaining about our elected leaders and take fully active roles in our precious democratic republic, seeking the betterment of all and the belittling of none. Only if we start thinking more about how our actions and inactions affect others and the interdependent web of which we are a part. The interdependent web of which we are a part, not the apex, not even an essential part, perhaps. The earth sure as hell can thrive without us, but we cannot thrive without it. In Battlestar Galactica, the survivors were bound for a place called Earth. It was like paradise to them, and they weren't even sure it existed. Well, we're here. It's hard to imagine a more magnificent planet in the universe, really. Miracles upon miracles, wherever you look, up to the skies, the oceans, the mountains, and the very tiny things. We are bound to a place called Earth. Let's make this crisis the opportunity for inner transformation that leads to global transformation. And let's remember, the real work is with ourselves, our everyday habits, the version of humanity we present to our families, our neighbors, the most vulnerable in our community, and especially those we may consider our enemies. And to all living things on this miracle we call Earth our home. In many ways, this time may be a gift. Let's use it well. I invite you now to please join in singing our closing hymn, number 163, For the Earth Forever Turning.
For the earth forever turning, for the skies in every sea, for our lives and all we cherish, we are joyful song of peace. For the mountains, hills, and pastures in their silent majesty, for our life and all of nature, so we are joyful song of peace. For the sun, for rain and thunder, for the seasons' harmony, for our lives and all creation, see, we are joyful song of peace. Sing our joyful song of peace.
In closing today, our words are from Deborah Hafner. The days of awe begin with us tonight. May the next 10 days be days of reflection, introspection, and peace. May we prepare ourselves for the changes in the year to come. May it be a good year. May it be a healthy year. May it be a year of peace for all of us, all around the globe. May it be a year of peace within ourselves. May we live our lives with integrity, service, and love. May we be blessed with the strength of this community, our families, of our friends. May we remember what is truly important in life, and may we remember to be grateful every day. May we all be inscribed another year in the book of life. Lashana Tova. Blessed be.